So every time we deal with Donald Trump, there has to be a deal in it for him. Let's take a look at the Hyundai plant raid. What benefit did it have for Donald Trump besides tanking a deal in a Democratic city? Let's take a look at it.
The EV battery plant in Georgia has some manufacturers worried. Of course, a big part of the president's agenda was trying to convince foreign companies to make direct investment in the United States. Is this a new risk they face?
Well, it was kind of silly, right? We like that Hyundai's building a plant. That's great, right? They should get the proper visa for their workers. Come on, get a work visa. What they did is they came in on tourist visas, and then they're just working in this plant.
Now, that is not the truth. We'll get to that in a minute.
I mean, so Hyundai, who's a total grown-up, more than capable of getting them the proper visa, should have gotten them the proper visa. So it's just wrong of them to have gotten the wrong, they should have gotten the right visas. You can't, ICE has got to do its job, right? And if there are all these people who are in this country on the wrong visa, change it. But the fact is, they'll fix that. Hyundai.
Now, if people are in the country with the wrong visas, why didn't they get on their own planes and go back home? Why weren't they held in immigration? Why weren't they sent to Venezuela? Why were they allowed to leave the country freely at their own disposal? Because their government paid for their way home. ICE had nothing to do with it.
So first, this is actually a protest sign at the airport. And they wrote in English because they want to make sure that the world can see this. It says, "We're friends, aren't we?" And it depicts an ICE agent wearing a Trump mask, so basically a Trumper, and carrying a bag of money, essentially portraying these people like criminals. This is the bag of money close-up. It has an American flag on it. Again, it's a bag of money, and it says, "I love Korea."
So this is the actual story.
11 clients you had when we last spoke.
They are at the airport in Atlanta. They left the detention facility this morning at 1:45 or so on buses provided by Hyundai. Rather than ICE, they were released without going out in handcuffs, which was...
There it is at the bottom. He represents 7 South Koreans, 3 Japanese, and 3 Hispanic, all of whom had legal visas.
Apparently the main hang-up for not departing on Wednesday, and they all can come back to the United States. This is weird. It's weird because why are they leaving if they can all come back? Generally speaking, ICE will tell you, oh, they all took voluntary departure. Voluntary departure is a legal thing. I mean, it's a statute that says if you leave, generally you're free to come back, but you do certain things when you take voluntary departure. You say, I agree that I violated the law, but you're going to let me come back with a new visa. But these folks don't need a new visa. So it's not really voluntary departure. It's more of a legal fiction. And I don't want to say an ICE cover-up, but it's certainly a glaze on the cake, so to speak, of ICE's errors here in detaining these innocent Koreans and Japanese folks for the last 6 days.
Now, in the big scheme of things, there probably were some people there that were in the process of getting visas because when they first came over, they allowed them all to come in on certain types of visas, but not everybody was of the same position and doing the same things, even though they allowed them to come on that same visa. So when the ladies snitched on them and they all came in, they knew who was there properly and who was there not properly inside the building, for example, because that's what these visas have special stipulations on. The lady said that they were there being paid by American tax dollars without having that proper visas where we can get our taxation for it. That wasn't true. None of them people inside that plant were getting paid by American dollars. They were all Hyundai's people. The plant's not even up and running yet. And we knew that when we let them in. So they knew there was over 400 something workers there. Some possibly, had visas that probably weren't exactly what they were supposed to be doing inside the place. Some had visas just to come and do negotiations. They weren't supposed to be physically working. But the idea of physically working is that you be working on our soil and we not getting any money for that. So each visa has a certain amount of money it costs for each visa. And I guess it's more expensive if you have to do physical labor and stuff like that. But if you're just coming to do negotiations, then that's another type of visa. So apparently they all slid on the, SB1, I think. And there's certain kind of visas that they need to be doing other things here. So we let that happen. And we knew that happened. They didn't bug about it then. It wasn't until the negotiations after the Korean president left began to go sour that it all came down to, hey, let's shake the boat. But I'm going to let him continue. We'll get to that in a minute.
What process led to the release of your Korean clients?
Oh, I think the president of Korea calling President Trump is what led to the release of these individuals, as well as the 3 or 4 Japanese that were also detained at the same time. This would not have happened without direct intervention abroad. We would have obviously gone to court eventually and gotten a court order and had these guys released, but they would have been in custody for weeks and weeks longer. So the direct intervention was absolutely essential as part of this. And I'm sorry it took that, but it was absolutely necessary. An interesting thing happened yesterday. The foreign minister came to America on the plane and went to DC to meet with the Secretary Rubio. And the American readout of that meeting didn't mention the Hyundai plant, which is odd since that was the reason the foreign minister came. But the Korean language readout was absolutely all about the Hyundai plant, including stating that President Trump had given a direct order to ICE to release these individuals and ensure that they could come back to the United States. It's no surprise that the American readout didn't include that, because that makes you understand the massive error that ICE made here in detaining these individuals.
On top of that, it's
So now I want to go into the reason why it happened in the first place. Because everything was good. They've been building this plant for almost 3 years. Why all of a sudden? Here we go.
something that actually goes back to the Biden administration, because for a number of years, the US has been pursuing policies that are intended through both carrot and stick, bring over industrial capacity from South Korea specifically to the US. And, this battery plant in Georgia was just one of those aspects. Now, just before this raid, we saw a meeting between Lee Jae-myung, the new president of South Korea, and President Trump at the White House, which, on the surface appeared to be very conciliatory. It seemed like, they were getting along famously. At least that was a takeaway from a lot of people. But one thing that was very noteworthy from that meeting was that there was no joint statement that was announced between the two governments. This was ostensibly a meeting to finalize the tariff deal that the two governments have been negotiating for the past several months now. And while we know that South Korea has already decided that it will put up $350 billion of state-backed investments into U.S. industry, what we don't know is how exactly those funds will be allocated and dispersed. The Trump administration has said that they would like the power for the president to be able to personally decide those allocations.
The power of the presidency to be able to personally to allocate the funds that Korea is investing in America. I'm gonna give you all my money, and you get to decide where you put it. Well, hell, we just might as well put it in the Trump stablecoin.
Of course, that is, I think, quite alarming to the South Koreans. They're not necessarily making that public, but I think the longevity and the long time that these negotiations are taking is certainly an indication of things. Now, getting back more specifically into this raid, I have to say this has caused quite an amount of alarm back in South Korea. The footage and the photos of this raid are being circulated widely by media, and we're seeing this very rare moment, actually, where both liberal and conservative outlets and political parties are coming out in denunciation of the Trump administration. So there are many people who are wondering if this could be the start of a sea change in South Korean politics and position towards the U.S.
And, To expand on that a bit, you've talked a lot about, written a lot about before how there's a very unequal nature to the relationship between the US and South Korea. And I'm curious how you would place this incident in that sort of broader imperial relationship between these two countries.
Absolutely. I think that's a great question. I think on the US side of things, the tariff negotiations tend to be discussed as if they are just kind of another jobs package or like another bilateral arrangement between nations. The tariff deals that the Trump administration is signing with other governments are very, very bizarre. Because what they are essentially asking, or demanding rather, is that foreign governments put up hundreds of billions of dollars, often from their own public purse or connected to their public purse through state-run institutions, and then invest that into the US, which is pitched to the US public as a job creation program. But I think a better way to understand it is that this is kind of a version of the congressional bailouts of Wall Street that we saw in the wake of 2008, only this time it's being financed by taxpayers and citizens around the globe instead of simply by the US public. And so South Korea in particular has been asked to put up this $350 billion package.
$350 billion.
In addition to that, there were $150 billion additional dollars that were put up by private corporations. There was a separate $100 billion purchase deal for U.S. liquid natural gas. That's already $600 billion from South Korea, which has an annual GDP of something like 1.7 trillion. So we're talking about a third of South Korea's annual GDP, which is being transferred more or less from the pockets of its working people into the pockets of Wall Street. There's really no other way to put it. This is robbery.
Now, it wouldn't be robbery if they weren't trying to make the deal to say Trump gets to put the money wherever he wants. You might as well give him a golf course or a fucking Las Vegas Strip, because that seems to be what it takes to get a deal with our administration. Put money in Trump's pocket. I'm just saying.